bourgeoisie produces, above all, art zone. Grave diggers.
Hello, everyone.
Hey folks, we're here on a cloudy Sunday afternoon.
It is nighttime where I am.
We are again separated by time zones and distance, but our connection of friendship remains ever strong.
Aw, Amr.
Yeah, I'm learning French, so I'm becoming more of a poet. It's weird, it's infectious like that.
We want to give a content warning for this episode. This does contain mentions of child sexual abuse. If you are a survivor of sexual violence and need to talk, RAIN has a 24/7 hotline at 1-800-656-4673 and a live chat at rain.org. That's RAIN with two N's, RAINN.org. And we'll put that in our episode description as well. It's really a big part of this episode, so if child sexual abuse is something that you really just can't hear about right now, I wouldn't recommend this as an episode for you. I initially was working on a script about another case with some similarities, but it became increasingly upsetting for me. So
I can testify to that.
Yeah.
Erin kept texting me more and more angry. Not angry at me text, but like, look at the absolute state of this texts, which I can absolutely confirm.
Yeah, and then this story broke. So I decided to put that episode to the side for a while. Maybe it's something better for Patreon. I mean, the topic is very upsetting. On Thursday, former reality TV star and right-wing lobbyist Josh Duggar was arrested by U.S. Marshals. Friday, news broke that Duggar is charged with receiving and possessing child sexual abuse images. If convicted, Duggar faces up to 20 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. He has pleaded not guilty on both counts. Unless he changes his plea, the case will likely go to trial. If Duggar is released on bond, he is forbidden to live in a home with minors. These aren't the first allegations of sex crimes against children for Josh Duggar. In 2015, In Touch Weekly reported that between 2002 and 2003, when he was 14 and 15 years old, Duggar molested 5 girls, 4 of whom are his sisters. His parents sent him away for a few months and had him speak to an Arkansas state trooper and family friend. Charges were never filed, and Josh Duggar faced no legal repercussions for those transgressions. Cable channel TLC canceled the Duggar family's reality show, 19 Kids and Counting, after these allegations surfaced. But the series continued in the form of a spin-off, Counting On. What appears on its face to be an upbeat reality show about a large family is also a window into the all-embracing conservatism of some Christian fundamentalists in the United States. So in this episode, we're going to discuss the Duggars and their reactionary views, break down some of Josh's past predatory behavior, and talk about how some communities shield serial abusers. So the Duggar family consists of patriarch Jim Bob Duggar, and I could not make these names up.
I swear to God, when I first read that, I couldn't stop laughing. It's the best thing ever.
So his wife is named Michelle, but their 19 children all have names that start with J. And they're not overall normal ones either. Like, there's no Jake or Julie. They're like Jedediah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure they just pick up names off the Bible. Like, they go back. Does the Bible have an index? I wonder if it goes back to the index and under J, just look for all the names.
But it's weird because there's like a Joshua, a Joseph, a Josiah, and a Josie. So, like, those are all so... It's like if my parents had named my brother Eric, and we were Aaron and Eric. Like, that's borderline abusive.
Yeah, that is strange. But yeah, I mean, the Duggars were like one letter away from a lot more interesting initials insofar as they could have named their kids with the letter K.
But that's the Kardashian Jenners.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, except for Rob.
But no one cares about Rob.
But the Kardashians, like, this family makes the Kardashians look good. Like, at least Kris Jenner is objectively funny and, like, kind of a MILF.
Yeah, and also, like, I don't know, I don't have any particular ill will towards the Kardashians. Like, I think there's, like, you know, they're just people who know how to monetize their fame. As far as I'm concerned, they haven't done anything particularly harmful.
So now the Duggar family consists of all of their kids, so 19 kids, and then those kids' spouses and their kids. Joshua James Duggar, who's now 33 years old, is the eldest.
Yeah, so, okay, look, 19 kids, all I can think of is how the hell is Michelle still alive? Because, childbirth is a risky medical process, generally speaking. So, multiply that risk by 19, and, it's a wonder that she's still alive and kicking.
We will get more into this, repeatedly having children thing. And I honestly wonder, in addition to religious conviction, if there's a psychological reason behind it. Like she likes being pregnant and having a newborn. Because that's a thing.
Do people do that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Huh. That is weird. That is really weird.
So the family has been political for a while. Jim Bob was a member of the Arkansas House of Representatives from 1999 to 2002. And the family has significant connections in the American Republican political scene, as we're going to discuss later in the episode. The Duggars are evangelical Christians, specifically independent Baptists, and extreme conservatives. They also follow the quiverful theological position, which earns its name from Psalm chapter 127, verses 3 through 5. Quote, "Children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from him. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are children born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be put to shame when they contend with their opponents in court." End quote.
That sounds like some very, very cheap Tumblr poetry circa 2012.
That's what Psalm is.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan.
But Psalm chapter 137, literally 10 chapters later, has a verse that's like, you should bash babies against rocks. That's good.
I mean, they're complementary. The reason they tell you to have a lot of babies is because you need to bash them against rocks. So you need to have multiple children, and then of those children, only a few survive because the rest are being bashed on rocks.
So the Duggars, along with thousands or possibly tens of thousands of quiverful families, believe it is their holy duty to have as many children as possible. They don't use any sort of birth control, leaving it up to God to determine how many children they should have and when. Michelle Duggar has even advised that wives, quote, always need to be available, end quote, suggesting that even abstinence is frowned upon. Now, this is really horrifying to me. Women are expected to be sexually available for their husbands and not use any type of contraception, meaning the only time they're not at risk of pregnancy is when they're already pregnant or postmenopausal. They say that pregnancy is up to God, but it's really up to the husband because if you're supposed to let him nut in you whenever he wants, assuming no fertility issues, you're just going to keep having babies for as long as you're having sex.
Yeah, I mean, unless the husband's swimmers have issues with their vigor, then yeah, maybe the wife gets lucky and isn't pregnant 24/7.
I mean, I think people should be allowed to make their own family decisions, even if it means having 19 kids. But I personally think this sounds like an awful way to live and a cult of misogyny.
Yeah, I mean, also, I feel like what kind of parenting will you be able to give the children when you have 19 of them and so can't, really pay attention to each one?
Yeah, definitely. And I wonder, too, with that religious angle, some people believe that those who are wealthy are more pious or more favored by God. And if you follow this belief system that children are a blessing and you're supposed to have as many as possible, then having 19 kids is look at me. Look how well I'm doing and how God thinks I'm the best. I must be a really good person.
Yeah, I mean, it's circular logic. You have money, therefore you are good, therefore God is rewarding you, therefore you have more money and more children.
Yeah, exactly. It's also funny that these people are literally trying to change the demographics of the United States and make it more Christian fundamentalist. Statistically, religious conservatives have more children, but it very rarely leads to sweeping demographic change. Just ask the Amish or the Hasidim.
I find it fascinating how demographics and like this obsession with demographic change and like affecting demographics is very much a centerpiece of like reactionary groups, whether that's like, American evangelicals or Zionists or even like Salafists. It's all like, we need to make more babies and like this genuine fear that everyone else is making more babies than them. And so they have to like catch up to like, produce children at like industrial scale.
These people have been like having 11 kids a family since the 80s. Most of these kids are now adults who can vote. And yet, like, we are moving forward in terms of like same-sex marriage is now legal everywhere in the country.
Yeah, I mean, I think they operate under the belief, whether that's true or not, that the way politics works is like our people versus their people. And like just by virtue of like having more kids, the kids they're gonna have are gonna be like of the same as them politically, which like is completely facile because at the end of the day, their kids can like end up being like Maoist or whatever. There's no guarantee as to where your kids will end up politically.
Right, but it shows their attitude that they think having all these kids is going to make little copies of them and their political beliefs.
Yeah, it's pure narcissism.
Right. There's a podcast called Kitchen Table Cult where now adults who grew up in the Quiverful movement and have since broken away discuss their experiences. I'd really recommend it to those interested in learning more about this and how harmful it is, because I didn't grow up in this movement. There were some pretty conservative evangelicals in my town, but thankfully not my family.
I don't know if we'd be able to talk if you're evangelical. No, not because like I would dislike you or anything. I mean, I wouldn't be even able to know because, your parents will probably tell you don't talk to men, period.
And also like all of these people are white.
Oh yeah, well yeah. That's a given at this point, yeah.
Additionally, the Duggars have all sorts of puritanical rules for their children. As extreme homophobes and transphobes, they expect all their children to be cis and straight. Obviously, that's not how it works, and any potentially queer child of the Duggar family must either lie to themselves and everyone around them or face being disowned. Molesting your siblings, however, is apparently forgivable because these people are vile hypocrites. So, some of their other regressive family policies are as follows. First, no going to school. Children are homeschooled with a Christian curriculum. This is really disturbing to me, especially in this case, because one feature of school is that teachers are trained to recognize and report signs of abuse.
Yeah, so there's currently a lot of controversy going on in France over adjustments to their laws. So basically, after the Salafist killed that French teacher, there's been all this like uproar over changes in laws and so on. And one of the things that Macron has been trying to do is changing the law to mandate that all children in France must attend schools and, removing the exception that you can homeschool for religious purposes. I don't quite understand the legality behind that particular exception, but critics seem to think that like removing that exception is Islamophobic because a lot of the people that homeschool their children in France are like Muslim migrant families. But I think that's absurd because schools should be mandatory. I am firmly of the belief that schools should be mandatory because kids need to be in an environment outside their home and engage with their peers. And yes, I know homeschool people will come and say, yeah, but like my parents organized like play dates with other homeschooled kids. But that presupposes that the other kids come from a similar background because usually when people are homeschooled, there's a particular type of person that is homeschooled. Whereas in school, you get exposed to all kinds of other people, like from other backgrounds and stuff. And it allows you like exposure to the wider world. And I think that's like one of the cornerstones of the importance of school.
No, you're totally right. But I think that's exactly why the Duggars don't want their kids to go to school. They don't want them to develop critical thinking skills and progress toward independence and socialize with peers their age. Like they want to keep them socially stunted.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that makes sense because, in that case, I feel like it operates a lot like a cult, like cutting them off from social support, etc., etc.
It's also funny because they, as in the Duggars, complain about paying property taxes, which go towards schools, because they homeschool their kids. But like, do you not fucking know how taxes work? My parents pay property taxes and I have not been in school for like 7 years. And I never went to school in the district that they live in, ever.
Yeah, I mean, they're also of the belief that, like, taxes should work the same way as, like, buying something. You check off a list of things you want to fund and list of things you don't want to fund. And I'm pretty sure in this case, these people are probably, like, heavily anti-tax, like, libertarian types, because, they want their money for themselves and not for the godless, communist, atheist liberals in New York City.
Well, they're also so smug about it. Like, we pay taxes, but we don't even use that service. We don't send our kids to that public school. And it's like, okay, well, I pay my taxes and I pay for insurance to fund medical research for testicular cancer, and I don't have balls, but I'm certainly glad I did.
I mean, but here's the thing, right? It's not like they're forbidden from going to school. It's not like they're paying taxes that go to, like, schooling, but they're, like, restricted by the state or whatever from going to school. They're more than welcome to go to school. They just don't want to.
Right. No matter what circumstance they're in, every child in the United States has a right to go to public school.
It's the same in Canada. Even if you have, like, medical disabilities, the school district board and various medical institutions must find a way to accommodate you.
Right. So, going on with their list of rules, from toddler age, girls are always covered from their necks to their knees and forbidden from wearing pants. They wear at least knee-length skirts and dresses. When they go swimming, they wear tank tops and long shorts. Like, modesty is fine if that's what you want, but this is enforced by adults and really sexualizes children from toddler age. Like, why does a 3-year-old girl need to cover up to her neck?
Yeah, it's really weird. It's really, really disturbing.
Other children in the family, usually girls, of course, must care for the younger children. There's a term for this. It's called parentification, and some psychologists classify it as a type of abuse.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't one of the morals of the story Cinderella not to treat, like, your kids or available kids as their, like, house servants? Like, let the kids be kids, for God's sake.
They literally call it the buddy system, and they assign older kids to basically parent the younger kids.
Yeah, at that rate, you're just making more kids so they can grow up and raise your younger kids.
Right, and also, how are those kids homeschooling if they're taking care of a dozen younger siblings?
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure it's like all of them are like the girls. The people who are doing the raising at home aren't the sons.
Right. And it's like, okay, obviously you don't want them to go to school because you would lose 8 hours a day of free labor.
I'm pretty sure it's longer than 8 hours, but yes.
Yeah. So there's no smoking or drinking in the Duggar house. That's not really unusual for, like, super conservative families, but nothing in the Bible says you can't smoke and drink. They just do that for themselves, I guess. There's no unapproved media consumption like risque music, primetime television, romance novels. Only wholesome Christian media is allowed.
Okay, so these are the people that, like, pay money to watch Kevin Sorbo movies, which now makes a lot of sense because I've always been curious as to how the hell people pay. Like where does Kevin Sorbo get his money? But this makes a lot of sense.
There's also no dancing because it, quote, encourages sexual feelings, end quote. So just no dancing, not even at a wedding. No dancing at all, ever.
Hey, these people will get along perfectly well with my extended family who also don't allow dancing at weddings, so...
Really?
Some parts of my extended family, yes.
I have this super, super non-sexy dance that I do where I, like, tip my shoulders back and wiggle my arms around, and my mom hates it. She is so embarrassed by it.
Oh, yeah, I mean, if I saw that, I'd forbid you, not because it's sexual, but because it's absolutely embarrassing.
It's so unsexual. It'll make you never want to have sex again. Like, the Duggars should invite me over to perform.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's a good business strategy.
You are not allowed to go to the beach if you're a Duggar member, because other people might be wearing bikinis. So even if you have those modest swimsuits, those are for, like, not beach locations, so...
Like private pools.
I assume. No dressing up or going trick-or-treating on Halloween because it's, quote, part of a demonic realm God wants us to stay away from, end quote. Now listen to me. This is anti-Irish sentiment. This is hibernophobia.
Yeah, I mean, isn't Halloween, like, originally an Irish holiday? So these people are, like, anti-papist.
Oh, I'm sure they're anti-Catholic. Okay, no social media until you're married. no associating with degenerates like unwed mothers, and absolutely no physical contact with members of the opposite sex before marriage. Duggars don't date. They do something called courtship, which is basically hanging out with a potential marriage partner in group settings only and getting to know one another. To court one of Jim Bob's daughters, a man first needs to ask his permission.
Let me pause there because dads who say this or do this are like my favorite type of people. Because like, the kind of dads who wear like t-shirts that are like, whatever you do to my daughter, you must do to me, or like, I'll do to you or whatever. And it's like, there's so much latent Freudian sexuality going on there. Like, if you touch my daughter, I'll touch you. If you fuck my daughter, I'll fuck you. Now, I'm gonna meet you behind the shed in 5 minutes. You must fuck me and then I will fuck you. And it's like, okay, dude. Like, clearly you have nothing. You're very normal brain right here.
Yeah, it's so creepy. Being alone together while courting is forbidden. Even texts and phone calls must be in group chats or monitored. Again, physical contact is strictly prohibited. Maybe a short side hug is acceptable after a couple is engaged, but anything else is off limits. The Duggar children even allegedly saved their first kiss for their wedding day.
Okay, imagine being with a Duggar, okay? And, I know they don't date people like us. They date people like who are also the same mentality. But imagine you're with them and like, you date and then you get married. And your first night as a wedded couple, you're basically guiding them on what to do because you're going to spend the first year of your marriage just teaching them normal life experiences that people have like at a much earlier time.
It's also super creepy because Josh Duggar claims that he saved his first kiss for his wedding day, but he molested his sisters before that. It just really shows how performative this all is. Like that he would even say that in the first place. I saved my first kiss for my wedding day. Like it's something special after he's done this horrible thing.
Yeah.
So this is just so many levels of creepy. I don't even know where to start. Like this obsession with young people's, and it's mainly women and girls, let's be honest, their purity, it can be so traumatic for people, especially those who have survived sexual abuse. It ties a person's value to their sexual experiences or lack thereof, and preaches that those who don't follow these rules are contaminated. This culture also pushes people to get married young because they want to have sex and you have to be married to have sex. So obviously everyone is entitled to their own sexual boundaries. And if you want to wait until marriage, more power to you. But that should be your decision, not your dad's. More concerningly, this process discourages people from truly getting to know their future spouse as they're forbidden from living together or even being alone together. How can you figure out if someone is domestically abusive if you're not allowed to live with them before marriage? I wouldn't marry someone without living with them for this reason. Like, of course, you could also just move in together and then realize you're not compatible as living partners. Like, that person's really messy and you're not. Like, and that's a perfectly good reason for ending a relationship. It doesn't have to be abuse. But living with someone, in my opinion, is really revealing about your relationship.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, it doesn't have to be abuse, but like imagine like, getting married and then living with someone and realizing they're so insufferable and like they're a slob or, they don't clean up after themselves. They don't know how to clean up. It's kind of like you're trapped at that point.
I am apparently difficult to live with because, and this is true, I do this. When I have like a glass of water, instead of drinking it like a normal person, I like slurp the water off the top like an animal.
Why?
It's come up in all my relationships. I don't know why.
Can we work on that? Can you like train yourself to not do that? Is that possible?
I am working on it, okay? I'm working on it.
Okay.
But I've been alone for like 2 weeks now, so I've been slurping away.
Yeah, but you're not supposed to do it when you're alone, so you don't do it when you're around people.
I know. This episode is not making me look good with my unsexy dance and my slurping habit, but everyone has their things, guys.
Yeah, you're really selling yourself here.
Yeah, but I have a podcast.
That's fair. That's a fair point.
So precluding people from even being alone together before marriage is really just setting them up for conflict and abuse. And since this family also prohibits divorce, those people have almost no way to escape that relationship. So like if you end up with a water slurper like me, you're fucked.
Yeah, that's very dangerous.
This brings us to Josh Duggar, or as he's currently labeled on Wikipedia, sex pest. We're going to focus more on his confirmed past than the current charges against him because we don't know much about that case except that it's starting. Born March 3rd, 1988, Joshua James Duggar is Jim Bob and Michelle's first child. Like all his siblings, he was homeschooled and got his GED at age 16. He did not attend college or university. Josh has appeared on TV with his family since 2005, when he was 17 years old. On June 15, 2007, Josh entered into a courtship with Anna Renee Keller. They became engaged and married the following year. The couple has 6 children and announced last week that they're expecting another.
Okay, so what's the over-under? What are the betting odds on Josh and Anna having more kids than Jim Bob and Michelle? Because I would really like to place bets on these freaks.
Well, it depends if he goes to jail.
Yeah, but even if he goes to jail, do they not allow, visits?
I think it depends. I think that's something that they, dangle over you. That's a carrot.
Oh, that makes sense, yeah.
In 2008, Josh Duggar worked on the Republican presidential primary campaign of Mike Huckabee. Huckabee lost the primary election to John McCain, and McCain lost the general election to Barack Obama.
Okay, as one factor of my disturbing masochism, I spent time sometimes, not out of genuine appreciation, but a weird, morbid curiosity watching Mike Huckabee's TV talk show called Huckabee. And first of all, I'm not joking when I say the average age of the live audience. Whenever the camera pans onto the audience, and there always is a live audience, well, not through the pandemic, but previously there's been live audience, and the live audience's average age hovers between 71 and 300. Basically, it's the same view you'd have as the time for medication at your local nursery home. Huckabee is the evangelical candidate. He's just a weird Yosemite Sam guy. If you don't know who he is, please, please, please Google Mike Huckabee and Sons, because his sons are genuinely large and round. They're like beach balls. And then his daughter is Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who has no relation to Bernie Sanders.
We need to get you a new hobby.
I said I'm a masochist. I admitted that.
Yeah, stick with the French classes.
Okay.
In 2012, Josh also spoke at rallies for Republican presidential primary candidate Rick Santorum. From 2013 to 2015, Josh Duggar worked as the executive director of political action and lobbying organization FRC Action, part of the Family Research Council. The FRC is a fundamentalist Protestant lobbying organization and has been classified by the Southern Poverty Law Center as an anti-LGBT hate group since 2010. From Wikipedia, quote, "The FRC opposes and lobbies against access to pornography, embryonic stem cell research, abortion, divorce, and LGBT rights, such as anti-discrimination laws, same-sex marriage, same-sex civil unions, and LGBT adoption." End quote. They also oppose scientific literacy in schools, like teaching evolution, and deny that climate change is real and caused by humans. So they're incredibly reactionary and basically want to institute Christian fundamentalism as policy. Now, I looked around a little bit more, and the FRC has some bizarre takes too, some of which I think we should discuss. First, they think ISIS was caused by the constitutional separation of the church and state. Do they know what ISIS is? ISIS is literally a wannabe religious fundamentalist state. Granted that religion is Islam and not Christianity, but I don't understand this. How does the US Constitution affect ISIS at all? Do they think Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi started ISIS to spite Thomas Jefferson?
Yeah, in their defense, you can't have a Salafist Muslim caliphate if you live in a Christian theocracy, tapping head meme.
That's a good point. You should work for the FRC. I hear there's an opening.
Oh, I'm more than happy. If they pay me enough, I'll sell out and become a Bible guy.
So they also believe medical workers should be allowed to withhold care if it conflicts with their values. Such treatments include abortion, birth control, and blood transfusions. I had to look up the problem with blood transfusions because I don't see why someone would morally oppose that. And it's because, and I swear to God this is real, only the shed blood of Jesus Christ can redeem us. So it's forbidden to take anyone else's blood.
So I work in a medical setting and I have come across patients, usually Amish or Mennonite, who reject transfusions for that reason.
But those are patients. These people want to permit doctors to watch people bleed out in front of them because only Jesus can save us. What the fuck? Are Amish people allowed to withhold blood transfusions from their kids?
I'm not sure. I know, like, when the patients come in, the Amish and the Mennonites explicitly, like, they tell the medical team that they won't be doing blood transfusions.
That's frightening to me.
Yeah.
So the FRC also thinks married couples with children should have to wait a mandatory period of 1 year before they can legally divorce so that they can receive marriage counseling unless there's domestic violence. So the trick, my friends, is to have children without getting married. Problem solved. Remember, it's not premarital sex if you never get married.
Tapping head meme again.
This isn't that out of left field. Like, some states do have a waiting period to get divorced, but it's just a pain. Like, there's no reason for it.
Yeah, it shouldn't exist. Like, there's no reason for it to exist.
Now, the FRC, of course, as a very homophobic organization, believes that sodomy should be outlawed as gay behavior. But there's a few things here. Heterosexual couples can engage in sodomy. So is the sodomy illegal only if it's gay sodomy? This is my question. Are the straights permitted to sodomize? And what if it's only a little finger? What if it's her finger in his butt? What does the statute say? I want to know.
Yeah, we're very curious on the sexual laws of these people. Also, I feel like, from the way I understand the way the law is phrased, they phrase it such that anyone doing sodomy is by definition gay. So even if they're doing sodomy, like, in a straight setting, they're actually gay.
Oh, so like anyone who's interested in butt stuff is gay.
Is gay, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. The FRC also has some extraordinarily homophobic and outright false positions, including that LGBT people are more likely to molest children. Peer-reviewed research has consistently proven this is not the case.
A lot of projection going on there.
Right. If the FRC cared about protecting children, they might have done a more thorough background check on one of their executive directors, Josh Duggar. On May 21st, 2015, In Touch Weekly reported that Josh Duggar had molested 5 underage girls when he was a teenager. 4 of these girls were his sisters, and the other was a babysitter. The magazine obtained a redacted police report through the Freedom of Information Act, which was destroyed and expunged from public record the same day the story was published. Put a pin in this piece of information because we're going to come back to it. In March of 2002, then 14-year-old Josh confessed to his father, Jim Bob, that he had touched his sister's breasts and genitals on multiple occasions while they slept. Jim Bob and Michelle later told Megyn Kelly, then at Fox News, that they disciplined Josh at home. Other than that, no actions were taken. Then, in March of 2003, Jim Bob and Michelle learned about more molestation incidents and victims, including the babysitter. They also learned that Josh reached under one of his sister's dresses to touch her while she was sitting in his lap, and cornered a sister in the laundry room to reach under her clothing. One of these sisters was young enough that she didn't understand she had been assaulted. At this point, Jim Bob Duggar brought the issue to the elders of the family's church. They decided to send Josh away for 3 months. Michelle Duggar says he was working with a family friend to remodel a building. The family also described this as a Christian treatment program, but journalists have uncovered that it's likely Josh went to help renovate a building owned by the Institute in Basic Life Principles, an evangelical ministry founded by Bill Gothard. The Duggars have promoted Gothard's books and sermons in the past. In 2014, Gothard resigned from the church following allegations of sexual harassment, molestation, and failing to report child abuse. In July of 2003, Jim Bob Duggar told Officer Joseph Truman Hutchins of the Arkansas State Police about the molestation. Jim Bob asked Hutchins to have, quote, a very stern talk, end quote, with Josh about his actions, presumably trying to scare him straight. Even though troopers are mandatory reporters, Hutchins didn't file a report or take the case anywhere. Hutchins is currently serving a 56-year prison sentence in Arkansas for offenses related to the possession of child sexual abuse images.
Yeah, so, I mean, by very stern talk, does that mean Jim Bob was like, give my son tips and tricks to avoid being caught? Because the only thing I can imagine one sex pest telling another is that.
I mean, obviously it came out later, but it's worth pointing out that in response to Josh Duggar's child molestation, his parents referred to 2 men for help who were later revealed to also be sex pests. Like, there's definitely a pattern here.
Yeah.
In 2004, the Duggars began rising in national popularity with their television specials like 14 Children and Pregnant Again. These would eventually evolve into the TLC reality show 17 Kids and Counting, later changed to 18 Kids and then 19 Kids. On December 7th, 2006, An anonymous caller rang the Arkansas Child Abuse Hotline and reported the molestation allegations about Josh Duggar. The same day, an anonymous source emailed Harpo Studios in Chicago, warning Oprah Winfrey against publishing an interview with the Duggars due to Josh's history of sexual abuse. Oprah's team forwarded the email to law enforcement.
So I have very strong feelings on Oprah in that she should be put in front of a military revolutionary tribunal for her role in popularizing hacks and grifters like Doctors Phil and Oz. Her platform basically jump-started the careers of these essentially snake oil salesmen, and I have very strong feelings on her.
Well, I think we should also look at how TLC is responsible for amplifying the Duggars' views. Even before all of these allegations came out, they had a television show that these people, the Duggars, referred to as their ministry, and they were using it as a tool, first to make themselves look like great parents, which I don't think they are, and to try and convince more people to be like them. Like, they are heroes in the conservative, quiverful, super evangelical community.
That's disturbing. If your heroes are them, that is really sad.
So to this day, the tipster's identity is unknown, but I think it's safe to say that whoever made the phone call and sent the email is likely the same person. It seems like as the family became more popular, someone who knew about Josh's past and the family's inaction wasn't comfortable with them becoming a model family. That following week, law enforcement began speaking to the Duggars about the allegations, but since the most recent incident had occurred in 2003, more than 3.5 years before, the statute of limitations had run out and charges could not be filed. The police report then basically sat in the system.
At the end of the day, I feel like these people live in a part of the country that, like, not even just their family, but like everyone in their church, everyone in law, like they're all the same people, right? Like the guys in the police are the same people that are in church. They're the same people that are like own the shops and everything. They all believe the same thing.
Rumors circulated online for some time that Josh Duggar was a child molester, and that's why Oprah Winfrey canceled the interview. But this information was largely unknown to anyone beyond the Duggars' inner circle until the In Touch Weekly story in 2015. By that time, Josh Duggar was married with 3 children. He admitted to the molestation and stepped down from his position at the Family Research Council. FRC President Tony Perkins said, quote, "Josh believes that the situation will make it difficult for him to be effective in his current work. We believe this is the best decision for Josh and his family at this time. We will be praying for everyone involved." End quote. Note, he never actually condemns Josh or the molestation. We see this kind of language pretty consistently from the people around Josh Duggar, statements meant to minimize the harm he committed. Platitudes like, "I'm praying for everyone involved," obscure who is the victim and who is the offender, and also serve as an empty substitute for taking any real action against child abusers.
Yeah, so it completely flattens the relationship between abuser and victim, and it ends up making it sound like everyone involved is on a level playing field and everyone needs the same amount of prayer for the same reason.
It's just so empty, too. Thoughts and prayers, thoughts and prayers. Some of Josh's sisters, who were his victims, did a televised interview with Megyn Kelly saying that they had forgiven Josh and asked that the media also let it go. The same day the story was published, a judge granted a request for that police report to be destroyed. This request came from one of Josh's victims, who was still a minor at that time. Though the victim cannot be identified, I believe that it was one of Josh's sisters. I wonder if her family pressured her to request the report be destroyed or made the request on her behalf.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Yeah. Still, I also understand respecting victims' privacy is essential, and I'm sure it has been really hard on those girls that these allegations were made public.
I do think there are bigger questions here in terms of like the law, in terms of like, should there be a case where like reports can't be dismissed? Like if it's a child abuse case, for example, even if the victim asks for it to be dismissed, it shouldn't be dismissed because it should be retained just in case something happens in the future, if that makes sense.
I mean, I think the idea of a juvenile record isn't necessarily fair. Like, it kind of clashes with my politics in some ways, but then there's also evidence that sex crimes are very different than like crimes of poverty.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. Like, I don't think a juvenile record for things like, I don't know, like shoplifting or whatever should be like kept. But like, in this case, if someone reports someone else for doing sex crimes, for like being a sex pest or molesting someone, and then 20 years down the line, a request is made that the report should be dismissed or whatever, like, I don't know how the legality of that works, but like, requesting that a report be destroyed. I feel like if it's something like a sex crime, like there should be no reason for a report to be destroyed in those like cases, because it would be very important to like know in the future who's a sex pest and who's not.
Right, and like what their MO is.
Yeah.
TLC canceled 19 Kids and Counting in response to the allegations, but the series continued through a spin-off focus on the older Duggar children, Counting On. Additionally, the family has remained influential in evangelical Christian circles, running a blog and creating social media content about their fundamentalist lives. Family friends like Mike Huckabee also expressed support for the Duggars and Josh. A few months later, on August 20th, 2015, a hacking group calling itself the Impact Team stole and published the user data of Ashley Madison, a commercial dating website geared toward people seeking extramarital affairs. One such user was Josh Duggar, who used a credit card to pay $986 for his subscriptions. The Duggar family released a statement on its website with Josh writing, quote, "I have been the biggest hypocrite ever. While espousing faith and family values, I have secretly over the last several years been viewing pornography on the internet, and this became a secret addiction, and I became unfaithful to my wife. The last few years, while publicly stating I was fighting against immorality in our country, I was hiding my own personal failures," end quote.
Okay, so this is very funny to me, like in a grim way, because these people actually view porn as the same level as physically cheating on your spouse, because it shows how sexually repressed they are. Because if you remember, their family forbids them from dancing or going to the beach, because if they go to the beach, they see other people in bikinis, which I presume for the Duggars is the same as actually having sex with that person, which shows how like genuinely like psychologically damaged they all are.
I mean, it's up to each couple to determine like what is considered cheating or unfaithful in their relationship. Like your standards and boundaries might be different than other people's, and that's totally okay. But I think it's interesting that this statement focuses more on the pornography and just has one little thing that says, "I became unfaithful to my wife."
Yeah, I thought the exact same thing too. I kept reading it. I'm like, what does he mean? Does he mean that the pornography is unfaithful, or like he watched porn and then he became unfaithful insofar as he had an affair?
A few years ago, a sex worker alleged that he was violent with her and then dropped those charges, dropped the lawsuit. But it like this, "I became unfaithful to my wife." Like it's something that happened to him. Shut up.
Yeah, like society made him this way.
Right.
Yeah, like I slipped onto roller skates and I slid down a hill and into someone else, and that's how I had sex with someone else.
So after this, Duggar checked himself into a faith-based recovery program called Reformers Unanimous. Josh and Anna Duggar stayed together and had 3 more children. Anna is currently pregnant with a 7th baby, a girl. Now, a lot of people have a lot to say about Anna and why she stayed with him. And again, I don't like to judge other people so much for their relationships and how they choose to handle them. But there is a point, I think, where you need to protect your children. Like, you're the adult.
Yeah, at some point, I think she is like Anna should be responsible for the kid's safety if she knows that Josh is a danger to them, which he is.
Right. My mom grew up with a pretty abusive stepfather who basically treated them like Cinderella, making them cook and clean the house and like verbally and physically abuse some of them. And my mom's mom did nothing. Like she just let him act this way. And like she's an adult. They were children. She's an adult. She is their mother.
Yeah.
Since then, most of the public's focus has been on Josh Duggar's sisters. The Christianity industrial complex is definitely a thing, and lots of young, usually conventionally attractive, and nearly always white fundamentalists publish content on platforms like YouTube, where they push their books and blogs, as well as things like Bible journals and modest clothing. There's a YouTuber called Jimmy Snow who grew up in a fundamentalist household and makes some pretty good responses to these videos. If you're curious, you can go ahead and see them for yourself. Basically, these Bible freaks make videos about how you're not supposed to hug before marriage because it might descend into sexual chaos. I'm not even kidding. Maybe we're in the wrong business, Amr. Like, instead of doing a political podcast, we should start a YouTube channel where we scold people for being horny.
Yeah, we can become the first channel to appeal to both evangelicals and Salafists.
To give you an idea of how depraved these people are, in 2019, one of these YouTubers called Bethany Baird or Bethany Beal of Girl Defined posted a photo of herself smiling next to her great-grandfather's grave in Austria. Her grandpapa, Hans Großlöscher, was a Nazi and the mayor of a town called Saalfelden. Bethany captioned the photo, quote, "Another wonderful day in Austria. We had the opportunity to visit some World War II sites. It's always a sobering experience to think through all that happened during that time. With family that lived in Austria and were directly impacted by the war, I have a special interest in learning about what they went through." End quote. What they went through. Girl, they were the ones putting people through it. Shut the fuck up, Bethany. But notice, like, I became unfaithful to my wife. My family went through World War II as Nazis. They went through World War... Like, what?
Like, Nazism was inflicted on them.
Right. But when he's, like, the mayor of a town, so obviously he's, like, not just some, like, youth league member or whatever.
Yeah.
Not that that's okay either, but I digress. We return to Josh Duggar. On Thursday, Duggar was arrested and charged with receiving and possessing child sexual abuse images. Prosecutors allege he downloaded this material in May of 2019, and that some of the children were younger than 12 years old. Duggar has entered a not guilty plea, and his legal team says they plan on fighting the charges in court. The Duggars have released a statement saying that they love Josh and they're praying for him. Child molestation and cover-ups don't only happen in religious families and organizations, but I have to say I've noticed a pattern over the past couple of decades. The Catholic Church, the Hasidim, the Amish, and the Church of Latter-day Saints, aka the Mormons, have all faced allegations of concealing incidents of child sexual abuse. Again, this abuse can happen anywhere and unfortunately often occurs within families. I don't want to point our fingers only at religious organizations when other institutions like youth athletic leagues have had their fair share of child abuse and cover-ups too. But I'm just forever appalled by the hypocrisy of religious fundamentalists judging everyone else's sex lives while they close ranks around predators. I'm appalled, but I can't say I'm surprised by it. Purity culture protects serial predators and harms survivors by making sexual experience a determinant of someone's value. Teaching children that once someone has had a sexual experience, particularly if that person is a girl, she is impure and undesirable, shames survivors of sexual assault. Even the language we use to talk about sex, like losing your virginity, implies that a person has given up something valuable once they have sex. You are free to shape your sex life however you see fit so long as everyone involved can and does consent, but there's no moral superiority in not having sex. When people are ashamed and humiliated, they're less likely to come forward, making it easier for serial abusers to keep harming them and harming others. Purity culture also foments the type of misogyny that encourages abusers in the first place, the idea that women and girls are passive sexual objects made by God to submit to men.
Yeah, also the sexual purity culture views things that aren't meant to be sexual as sexual, like the aforementioned dancing and going to the beach, which ends up contributing to feelings of sexual repression and shame in the children growing up. And if you teach kids that everything is sexual and therefore shameful, those repressed feelings, especially during puberty, can cause all sorts of psychological damage and, trigger cycles of abuse.
It's also strange because I've watched some of these people's YouTube videos and looked at their content in doing research for this episode. And they say things like, sex is so great. Oh my goodness, it's so awesome. But it's God's gift to a man and a woman in marriage. So when you're like, oh my God, this thing is so good. You can't wait to do it. It's so much fun. And once you get married, it's going to be so much fun. But then also make this big stigma out of it and say it's totally forbidden in any other situation. Don't even think about it. How is a kid supposed to handle that?
Yeah, especially a kid with industrial amounts of hormones running through them via puberty.
Right. And like, I think we should just treat it like any other thing where it's like, yeah, it can be fun, it can be awkward, and in some circumstances, it can be horrible and traumatic. And the best way to keep you safe from that is by educating you and empowering you to make your own best decisions about your body.
Yeah, exactly.
I also think we need to have a very frank discussion on the left about how we should handle sex predators who hurt children. If you haven't read it, I'd highly recommend Sarah Schulman's Conflict is Not Abuse. It's a somewhat controversial text, but definitely worth reading for yourself. Schulman's central thesis is just that. Not all conflicts between people constitutes abuse, and we do a disservice to parties and survivors when we overstate harm. But it necessarily follows that abuse is not conflict. Child molestation is not an interpersonal dispute. It is one person harming others who are vulnerable targets. What upset me most about the episode that I was working on earlier was the readiness of some feminist writers, and I'm not talking about Schulman here, to label all alleged incidents of sexual abuse to be messy or complicated. Child sexual abuse is not messy. It is when someone harms a child in a very traumatic way. Now, I agree with the left that nearly all crime could be eliminated by redistributing wealth and focusing on community and social services rather than incarceration. Maybe if Josh Duggar didn't grow up in such a sexually repressive family, or if he had received proper psychological help as a teenager rather than faith-based treatment, this all could have been prevented. But as it stands, and if these allegations are true, it seems like he is not safe to be around children. What concerns me, though, is that in Josh's case, he allegedly confessed and sought help as a teenager and received community-based help from his family and church while avoiding legal punishment. But that doesn't seem to have helped him. So if we want to have community-based approaches to addressing these problems, we need to make sure they're genuine and not just focused on making the problem appear to go away without actually solving it.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because Josh Duggar approaches his dad after molesting and abusing his sisters, and it shows that he understood at the time that he was doing something morally abhorrent and sought help, but it seems that he was also living in an environment where such help is practically impossible to find. And I'm not excusing him or anything, but it does beg bigger questions on how to treat someone like Josh when he approaches someone and confesses and shows an honest desire to seek help. And a corollary of the abuse is not conflict mantra is not all abuses are qualitatively identical, insofar as some guy hitting on a woman at a nightclub in an uncomfortable or weird manner, and, that's not to say that that's okay, is not the same as, molesting children, and the legal and social approaches to these two situations should be different.
Yeah, I honestly don't know clearly there needs to be more done than what was done in the case of Josh. Like, he didn't receive proper psychological treatment and therapy. And I even agree that if someone comes forward and says they're struggling with sexual thoughts toward children, we should get that person help before they harm a child. Not that it should necessarily be destigmatized, because there should be a stigma around things that are actively harmful, but it should be safe for that person to receive treatment.
Yeah, there should be a difference between someone who, without hurting any children, actively seeks help and someone who acts on those impulses.
So that is the case as it stands. We will definitely post an update at some point. I read that the trial might happen as early as July, which is pretty quick for a trial, but it's the federal system, so it works a little differently. And from the preliminary research I've done, it looks like the feds have a pretty high conviction rate for this kind of stuff. So obviously not speaking to Josh's case in particular, but just looking at cases in the past, I would say statistically, it doesn't look good for him.
Yeah, it's hard for me to root for the feds because I'm not a big fan of the feds, but in this case, I'll make an exception.
Yeah, I'm not rooting for the system, but I am rooting for a person who is dangerous to others to not be able to cause harm to them. And I'm also rooting for his victims, that they can heal. Apparently, one of the sisters in the family, Jill Duggar, has separated in some way. She's sending her own kids to public school, and her husband have been banned from the Duggar family compound and shunned by the family. Whereas Josh, the child molester, has lived at the compound until Thursday when he was arrested.
Yeah, it shows you what the priorities are for these people.
Right. So if you like our content, you can find us on Patreon for more, patreon.com/DasCriminal, or Instagram @DasCriminalPod. If you could also rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast, download every week, it really helps drive us up in the algorithm so that more people can find us and enjoy.
Yeah, we really need to work the algorithm to absorb more people like Katamari Damacy. So yeah, until next time, everyone, have a good one. Bye.
Bye.